The moment you realized you were giving your life force to someone who saw you as an object to be used rather than a soul to be cherished. The universe was preparing you for your greatest lesson in self-worth. Who here has ever felt like they were pouring water into a bucket with no bottom? Raise your hand if you know what I'm talking about. You gave and gave until you had nothing left, and somehow it was never enough. They always needed more attention, more validation, more of your energy, more of your very essence. And when you finally looked in the mirror, you barely recognized the person staring back at you. That moment of recognition isn't your failure, it's your awakening. Sarah thought she was being loyal when she stayed for 7 years. 7 years of walking on eggshells, 7 years of making excuses for behavior that made her friends uncomfortable. 7 years of believing that if she just loved harder, tried more, gave more, everything would change. The night she found herself apologizing to him for crying about his latest affair, something inside her broke open. Not broke apart, broke open, like a seed that's been buried in darkness, finally cracking to reach toward light. She called me the next morning and said, "I just realized I've been trying to water a plastic plant for 7 years, expecting it to bloom." That's the moment when the real work begins. When you stop focusing on trying to change them and start asking the question that changes everything: why did I think this was what I deserved? Most people get stuck at the leaving part. They think the hard work is walking away, but walking away is just the first step. The real transformation happens when you're willing to look at the beliefs that led you to that doorstep in the first place. What was happening inside you that made emotional crumbs feel like a banquet? You weren't born believing you should accept being dismissed, criticized, manipulated, or treated as an option. You learned it somewhere. Someone taught you that love comes with conditions, that your worth depends on how much you can tolerate, that speaking up for yourself makes you selfish or difficult. This is where most people want to point fingers. They want to blame their childhood, their parents, their ex-husband, their narcissistic partner. And yes, these experiences shaped you, but here's the spiritual truth that will set you free. At some point in your adult life, you became responsible for healing what was broken. Not responsible for the breaking, responsible for the healing. The narcissist didn't create your wounds. They found them and pressed on them until you couldn't ignore them anymore. They were like a spiritual X-ray machine, revealing exactly where your self-worth had fractures you didn't even know existed. Think about it. How did they know exactly what buttons to push? How did they know exactly what promises would keep you hoping? How did they know exactly what fears would keep you silent? They could read you like a map because the territory was already marked by old pain, old programming, old decisions about what you were worth. This isn't about blame. This is about power. The power that comes from understanding that every relationship is a mirror, and toxic relationships are just mirrors with very bright lights. They show you exactly what needs healing, exactly what patterns need breaking, exactly what beliefs need upgrade. When you were a child and someone treated you poorly, you had no choice but to adapt. You developed survival strategies. You learned to be smaller, quieter, more accommodating. You learned to read moods and manage emotions that weren't even yours. You became an expert at sensing what others needed and providing it, even at your own expense. These were brilliant coping mechanisms for a powerless child. But you're not powerless anymore. You're not a child anymore. Yet somewhere along the way you kept using the same strategies, kept believing the same stories about your worth, kept accepting the same treatment you once had no choice but to endure. The narcissist was simply the universe's way of saying, it's time to graduate from these old patterns now. Every time they dismissed your feelings, the universe was asking, will you finally start validating your own emotions? Every time they made you question your reality, life was asking, will you finally trust your own inner knowing? Every time they demanded your attention while giving none in return, the cosmos was whispering, will you finally recognize that you deserve reciprocal love? But here's what most people don't understand about narcissistic relationships. They're not random. They're assigned. You didn't accidentally end up with someone who triggered every insecurity, every fear, every unhealed part of your heart. You were enrolled in an advanced course in self-worth, and they were your teacher. Not a good teacher, not a kind teacher, but a teacher nonetheless. The most dangerous lie you can tell yourself is that you're a victim of circumstances beyond your control. Yes, their behavior was their choice. Yes, they were responsible for their action. But your response, your choices, your decision to stay or go, your decision to heal or repeat the pattern, that's your responsibility. This responsibility isn't a burden, it's your power. Sarah realized this truth sitting in her empty apartment 3 months after finally leaving. She looked around at the silence, at the peace, at the absence of chaos, and she said, "For the first time in 7 years, I can hear my own thoughts." That's when she understood. The relationship wasn't just about him being toxic. It was about her being ready to outgrow the version of herself that thought she had to earn love through suffering. How many years did you spend trying to convince yourself that love meant accepting crumbs? How many nights did you lie awake wondering why you weren't enough? When the real question was, why did you think someone treating you poorly was your fault? The shame that keeps people trapped isn't really about what the narcissist did. It's about that says, how could I have been so stupid? How could I have stayed so long? How could I have not seen it sooner? That isn't protecting you. It's keeping you stuck in the same low-worth identity that attracted the situation in the first place. But what if your sensitivity wasn't a weakness? What if your ability to see potential in people wasn't naive? What if your capacity for love wasn't the problem? What if the only problem was that you hadn't learned to give those gifts to someone who matched your emotional generosity? You have to understand something. People with healthy self-worth don't stay in relationships where they're consistently treated poorly. Not because they're smarter or stronger, but because poor treatment feels foreign to them. It doesn't match their internal programming. It's like trying to play a country song on a station tuned to classical music. The signal just doesn't come through clearly. But when you've been programmed to believe that you have to work for love, that you have to prove your worth, that you have to be grateful for whatever attention you receive, then someone who gives you intense attention, followed by withdrawal, feels familiar. It feels like home, even when it's actually prison. The narcissist served a purpose in your spiritual development, whether they intended to or not. They held up a mirror that showed you every place where you had abandoned yourself. Every time you made excuses for their behavior, you were really seeing how you had learned to make excuses for treating yourself poorly. Every time you minimized your own needs to accommodate theirs, you were seeing a pattern that started long before you met them. This is why some people can leave immediately when they encounter toxic behavior, while others stay for years. It's not about intelligence or strength. It's about whether the treatment matches their internal blueprint for what they deserve. The good news is that blueprints can be rewritten. But first, you have to be willing to examine the original design. What were you taught about love in your earliest relationships? What did you learn about conflict, about expressing needs, about being valued? What messages did you absorb about your worth? Not the messages people said with their words, but the messages they sent with their actions, their attention, their presence or absence. Most people don't want to look at these early patterns, because it feels like they're betraying the people who raised them. But understanding isn't the same as blaming. You can acknowledge that someone did their best while also recognizing that their best included some harmful programming. You can love someone and still decide not to carry forward their limiting beliefs about your worth. The narcissist didn't choose you randomly. They could sense on some unconscious level that you had been trained to prioritize other people's needs over your own. They could feel that you had learned to find your worth through being useful, being needed, being accommodated. They recognized someone who would work overtime to prove they deserved love, because that's what emotional predators look for. But here's the beautiful truth that will change everything. The same sensitivity that made you vulnerable to manipulation is the same sensitivity that will make you extraordinary at creating healthy relationships. The same empathy that was exploited is the same empathy that will help you recognize and attract emotionally generous people. The same intuition that was overridden is the same intuition that will guide you toward what truly serves your highest good. You weren't broken by the experience. You were broken open. There's a difference. Breaking apart leaves you in pieces. Breaking open reveals the treasure that was always inside you. The strength you found when you finally said no. The clarity you gained about what you will and won't accept. The self-respect that grew every time you chose your own well-being over their approval. This is why leaving isn't failure, it's graduation. You graduated from believing that love requires sacrificing your peace. You graduated from thinking that someone's potential is more important than their actions. You graduated from the exhausting work of trying to manage someone else's emotions while ignoring your own. The most successful people who heal from narcissistic relationships don't spend years trying to figure out why the narcissist did what they did. They spend their energy understanding why they accepted. They become fascinated with their own patterns, instead of obsessed with their ex-partner's psychology. Because once you understand your patterns, you can change them. And once you change them, you become immune to the very behaviors that once controlled your life. Every ending contains within it the seeds of a beginning that your soul has been yearning for. But here's what nobody tells you about those seeds. They don't grow in contaminated soil. Who here has tried to plant a garden in ground that's been poisoned? Show me your hands. If you've ever wondered why nothing healthy would grow in your life, no matter how hard you tried, you kept watering the same patch of earth, adding fertilizer, praying for different results, but the soil itself was the problem. You can't build a cathedral on a foundation of quicksand. You can't create lasting love from a base of desperation. And you absolutely cannot attract a healthy relationship while you're still operating from the wounded beliefs that attracted the toxic one. This is where most people get it backwards. They think healing means finding someone better. They think transformation means changing their circumstances. They believe that the right person will fix what the wrong person broke. But success in love, like success in life, comes from the inside out, never from the outside in. The construction crew doesn't start with the roof. They start with clearing the land. They remove the debris. They dig down to solid ground. They pour a foundation that can support what they're building. This phase isn't glamorous. Nobody takes pictures of excavation work, but without it, everything else will eventually crumble. Your emotional foundation got cracked somewhere along the way. Maybe it happened in childhood when love came with condition. Maybe it developed in your first relationship when you learned that keeping peace was more important than keeping your. Maybe it formed slowly, one compromise at a time, until you couldn't remember what you actually wanted anymore. The narcissist didn't break your foundation. They just revealed where it was already unstable. Now comes the sacred work of rebuilding. And I call it sacred because this is where you stop being a victim of your programming and start becoming the architect of your own worth. Life operates in predictable cycles, just like farming season. There's a time for clearing the dead growth, a time for planting, a time for nurturing, and a time for harvest. Most people want to skip straight to harvest without doing the ground preparation. They want the healthy relationship without healing the wounded pattern. They want the self-worth without facing the beliefs that undermined it. But the universe doesn't work that way. You can't cheat the seasons. Right now you're in winter. The relationship is over. The old patterns are dying. Everything feels cold and empty. This isn't punishment. This is preparation. Winter is when the soil regenerates, when the roots grow deeper, when life gets ready for the explosion of growth that's coming. Most people hate the winter phase because they think it means nothing's happening, but everything is happening. Under the surface, where you can't see it yet, your whole internal system is restructuring itself. Here's what's actually occurring during this seemingly quiet time. Your nervous system is learning to relax without chaos. Your mind is remembering what your own thoughts sound like without constant criticism. Your heart is healing from the exhaustion of loving someone who couldn't love you back. Your intuition is getting stronger every day that you trust it instead of gaslighting yourself. But this only happens if you resist the urge to rush into spring before winter's work is complete. The biggest trap people fall into during the rebuilding phase is believing that time heals everything. time doesn't heal anything. Conscious work heals things. Time just gives you more opportunities to do the work, or more opportunities to repeat the same mistakes. What does conscious work look like? It means examining every belief you have about love and asking yourself, is this actually true? Or is this just what I was told? It means noticing when you start to minimize your own needs and catching yourself before you slip back into old patterns. It means learning to feel your feelings instead of analyzing them away or numbing them out. Most importantly, it means becoming the person you needed when you were in that dark place. Marcus told me something powerful last year. He said, I spent 2 years after leaving my ex-wife trying to understand why she cheated, why she lied, why she treated me like I was invisible. Then one day I realized I was asking the wrong question. The question wasn't why she did what she did. The question was why I stayed with someone who consistently showed me I didn't matter to them. That shift in focus changed everything for him. Instead of being a victim trying to solve the mystery of someone else's behavior, he became a student trying to understand his own patterns. He started asking himself, where did I learn that being treated poorly was normal? When did I decide that someone's potential was more important than their actions? How did I convince myself that love was supposed to be this difficult? This is the difference between healing and staying stuck. Stuck people stay focused on what was done to them. Healing people focus on what they're going to do differently. You cannot control what happened to you, but you have complete control over what you do with what happened to you. The rebuilding process has specific stages, and you can't skip any of them. First comes the clearing phase, where you identify and release the beliefs that no longer serve you. This is where you admit that being understanding doesn't mean being a doormat. This is where you acknowledge that being loyal doesn't mean accepting betrayal. This is where you recognize that being loving doesn't mean being limitless with your energy. Then comes the foundation phase, where you establish new non-negotiables, not rules for other people but standards for yourself. What will you absolutely accept in a relationship? What will you absolutely not tolerate? How will you respond when someone crosses a boundary? How will you handle that tells you to give just one more chance? These aren't arbitrary rules. They're based on your deepest values, your authentic needs, your understanding of what creates genuine intimacy versus what creates trauma bonds. After the foundation comes the building phase, where you practice these new patterns in small, safe situations. You practice saying no without over-explaining. You practice expressing a need without apologizing for having it. You practice trusting your intuition even when it conflicts with someone else's opinion. Finally comes the maintenance phase, where these new patterns become automatic, where treating yourself well becomes as natural as breathing, where you can spot manipulation from across the room because it feels so foreign to your nervous system. But here's what sabotages most people during this process. They try to rebuild while they're still in contact with the person who represents the old foundation. They try to create new patterns while still engaging with someone who triggers all the old patterns. You cannot heal a wound while the knife is still in it. This doesn't mean you have to hate your ex. This doesn't mean you can't wish them well, but it does mean you have to create space for your new identity to stabilize before you can safely interact with anyone who knew the old version of you. Some people call this no contact. I call it sacred space. It's the protective boundary around your reconstruction project. You wouldn't let random people walk through a construction site, and you shouldn't let emotional disturbances interrupt your healing process. During this sacred space time, you'll face the fear that stops most people from completing their transformation. The fear of being alone, not just physically alone, but alone with your own thoughts, your own feelings, your own company. This fear makes sense. If you spent years focusing on someone else's needs, managing someone else's emotions, anticipating someone else's reactions, then being alone with yourself can feel terrifying. Who are you when you're not trying to fix someone? What do you want when you're not busy wanting what they want? What do you think when you're not analyzing their behavior? But here's the secret that changes everything. The fear of being alone is actually the fear of being with someone you don't know very well yet, yourself. Most people who get trapped in toxic relationships have been strangers to themselves for years. They've been so busy adapting to other people's needs that they've lost touch with their own preferences, their own dreams, their own. The alone time isn't punishment. It's reintroduction. It's getting to know the person who's been waiting patiently for your attention while you were giving it away to people who didn't value it. Sarah discovered this truth about 6 months into her healing process. She told me, "I was terrified of Saturday nights because I didn't know what to do with myself. I had spent 7 years having my weekends dictated by his moods, his plans, his emergency. When I finally had a free Saturday, I sat on my couch and cried because I couldn't remember what I enjoyed doing. Then I realized I wasn't crying from sadness. I was crying from relief. For the first time in years I could choose what to do based on what I wanted, not what would keep someone else happy." That's when the real power emerges. When you realize that being alone is actually being free to think your own thoughts, feel your own feelings, make your own choices, create your own life. The people who heal completely from narcissistic relationships don't just learn to be okay alone. They learn to prefer their own company to the company of anyone who doesn't add genuine value to their life. They develop such a strong relationship with themselves that no one can ever make them feel alone again. This isn't selfish, this is essential, because you cannot give what you don't have. You cannot love someone else in a healthy way if you don't know how to love yourself in a healthy way. You cannot create boundaries with others if you don't have boundaries with your own thoughts and behavior. The daily practices that create this transformation are simpler than most people expect. Every morning before you do anything else, you check in with yourself, not with your phone, not with the news, not with what other people need from you, with yourself. How do you feel? What do you need today? What would bring you peace? Every evening, before you go to sleep, you review the day. Did you honor your needs? Did you speak your truth? Did you treat yourself with the same kindness you show to others? If not, what will you do differently tomorrow? This isn't self-improvement. This is self-reclamation. You're not trying to become someone new. You're becoming who you were before the world taught you to be someone else. The transformation happens in these small daily moments of choosing yourself, choosing to trust your instincts even when others question them, choosing to say no even when it disappoints someone, choosing to pursue what genuinely interests you even when it doesn't make sense to anyone else. People think healing is dramatic, but it's actually very quiet. It happens in the moment you stop explaining yourself to people who aren't actually listening. It happens when you realize that someone's opinion of you doesn't change your worth. It happens when you catch yourself about to apologize for taking up space and you just, 6 months from now, a year from now, you won't recognize the person who thought they deserved to be treated poorly. Not because you'll be completely different, but because you'll be completely yourself. The self you were always meant to be before you learned to compromise your truth for someone else's comfort. And when that transformation is complete, when your foundation is solid, and your boundaries are clear, and your worth is unshakable, that's when you become ready for the final phase of this process. That's when you become ready to step into the fullness of who you're meant to be, and attract relationships that match your new reality. The narcissist taught you what you will never accept again, and in that teaching, set you free to demand what you will always require. How many of you can now spot emotional manipulation from across the room? Raise your hand if you've developed what I call the early warning system. You know what I'm talking about. That immediate gut reaction when someone tries to guilt you, gaslight you, or charm you out of your boundary, where once you would have questioned yourself. Now you trust that inner alarm without hesitation. This is your graduation gift from the worst experience of your life. You have become immune to the very tactics that once controlled you completely. But with this new power comes a sacred responsibility. You cannot unknow what you now know. You cannot unsee what you have seen. You cannot go back to the unconscious patterns that allowed someone to use your own love against you. And most importantly, you cannot stay silent when you see others trapped in the same cycle you escaped. The people who heal completely from narcissistic abuse don't just rebuild their own lives, They become lighthouse keepers for others who are still lost in the storm. Not because they preach or give unwanted advice, but because they shine so brightly with authentic self-worth that they naturally illuminate the path for anyone ready to find their way home to themselves. This is what living your divine purpose actually means. It means becoming so unshakable in your own worth that you inspire others to question why they're accepting less than they deserve. It means speaking your truth so clearly that you give others permission to find their. It means loving yourself so completely that you show people what healthy love looks like. But first, you must master the daily disciplines that keep your foundation solid and your boundaries intact. Every morning, before you engage with the world, you engage with yourself, not in a selfish way, but in a self-responsible way. You check in with your energy levels, your emotional state, your capacity for giving. You ask yourself, what do I need today to stay aligned with my authentic self? What am I willing to give today, and what must I protect? This isn't a luxury, this is maintenance. Just like you wouldn't drive a car without checking the oil, you cannot navigate relationships without checking your internal systems first. Throughout the day, you practice what I call reality checking. When someone tells you something that doesn't feel right, instead of automatically questioning yourself, you pause and ask, does this align with what I've observed? Does this match their actions? Does this respect my experience? You have learned to trust your perceptions over someone else's persuasions. When someone tries to rush you into a decision, you slow down. When someone tries to make you feel guilty for having boundaries, you strengthen those boundaries. When someone demands explanations for your choices, you remember that no is a complete sentence. These aren't just techniques. These are the behaviors of someone who knows their worth and refuses to negotiate it. The most powerful discipline you can develop is what I call energy auditing. At the end of each day, you review your interactions and ask yourself, who added to my energy today, and who drained it? Who respected my time, and who wasted it? Who supported my growth, and who tried to keep me small? This isn't about judging people, this is about gathering data, because healthy people add more to your life than they take from it. Healthy people respect your boundaries instead of testing them. Healthy people want to see you succeed, not just succeed in meeting their needs. Once you start paying attention to these patterns, you realize how many relationships in your life have been energy vampires in disguise. People who always have emergencies when you're doing well. People who always need advice, but never take it. People who always have drama but never have gratitude. The old you would have felt obligated to keep giving. The new you understands that enabling someone's dysfunction isn't love. It's harm disguised as help. But here's what surprises most people about this new level of awareness. You don't become harder. You become more discerning. You don't love less. You love more wisely. You don't close your heart. You open it only to people who have earned the right to be there. This is where you learn the difference between being vulnerable and being reckless with your heart. Vulnerability is sharing your truth with someone who has proven they can handle it responsibly. Recklessness is sharing your truth with someone who uses it as ammunition against you later. The fear that stops most people from creating healthy relationships after narcissistic abuse is the fear that if they have standards, they'll end up alone. They think that having boundaries means being closed off. They believe that requiring reciprocity means being demanding. These fears are leftovers from the toxic relationship, where you were trained to believe that your needs were too much, your expectations were unreasonable, your desire for respect was selfish. But here's the truth that will set you free. The right person for you wants you to have standards. They want you to have boundaries. They want you to require reciprocity, because healthy people understand that standards create safety, boundaries create respect, and reciprocity creates sustainability. You will never have to convince the right person to treat you well. You will never have to explain why you deserve kindness. You will never have to prove that you're worth their consistency. The right person will show up consistently, because that's who they are, not because you've earned it. They will communicate clearly because they value understanding, not because you've demanded it. They will respect your boundaries, because they respect you, not because you've threatened consequences. This is what a healthy relationship feels like. It feels easy in the best possible way. Not easy like there's no depth or challenge, but easy like you don't have to work against each other to be together. Easy like you can be yourself, without fear of punishment. Easy like you can disagree without the relationship ending. Easy like love flows both ways, without keeping score. When you've lived through emotional manipulation, this kind of ease can feel suspicious at first. You might find yourself waiting for the other shoe to drop, looking for hidden agendas, testing whether their kindness is real or performance. This is normal. Your nervous system has been trained to expect chaos, so peace feels foreign. Your heart has been trained to work for love, so freely given affection feels too good to be true. Your mind has been trained to analyze everything, so simple honesty feels incomplete. But as you practice staying present with healthy treatment, instead of pushing it away, something miraculous happens. You start to remember what you forgot during those years of toxicity. This is how you were always meant to be loved. Not loved because you're perfect, but loved because you're human. Not loved because you never make mistakes, but loved through your imperfection. Not loved because you give more than you receive, but loved because the right person wants to give to you as much as they want to receive from you. This is when you realize that the narcissist didn't just teach you what you wouldn't accept anymore. They taught you what you would require forever. Honesty instead of manipulation. Consistency instead of chaos. Respect instead of contempt. Partnership instead of dictatorship. The people who heal completely from narcissistic relationships don't spend years in therapy trying to trust again. They spend their energy becoming the kind of person who naturally attracts trustworthy people. They don't work on their trust issues. They work on their self-worth issues. And the trust issues resolve themselves, because when you know you're worth being treated well, you don't waste time with people who can't or won't treat you well. When you know you deserve honesty, you don't make excuses for liars. When you know you're valuable, you don't chase people who act like you're disposable. Your story didn't end when the relationship ended. Your story began when you decided to write a different ending than the one they tried to give you. Instead of accepting the role of victim, you chose the role of victor. Instead of staying broken, you chose to break free. Instead of repeating the pattern, you chose to heal the pattern. But healing isn't a destination you arrive at once and stay forever. Healing is a daily choice to honor yourself, protect your energy, and create the life that reflects your true worth. It's choosing to speak up when the old you would have stayed silent. It's choosing to walk away when the old you would have stayed too long. It's choosing to believe in your own perceptions when the old you would have doubted everything. Every day that you choose yourself, you become strong. Every boundary you maintain, you become clearer. Every time you trust your intuition, you become wiser. Every moment you refuse to settle for less than you deserve, you become more attractive to people who can give you what you're worth. This is your divine purpose: to live so authentically, love so wisely, and value yourself so completely that you become living proof that it's possible to transform pain into power, wounds into wisdom, and betrayal into breakthrough. The world needs you to succeed, not just for yourself, but for everyone who is still trapped in relationships that diminish their light. They need to see that it's possible to leave. They need to see that it's possible to heal. They need to see that it's possible to build a life so beautiful that you're grateful the toxic relationship ended. You are not just healing for yourself. You are healing for your children, your friends, your family, and for people you will never meet whose lives will be changed by your example. The narcissist thought they were destroying you. Instead, they were forging you. Like steel and fire, you became stronger under pressure. Like diamonds formed under intense heat, you became more valuable through the process that was meant to break you. Now you have a choice. You can spend the rest of your life grateful for the lesson, or you can spend it bitter about the teacher. You can use your experience to help others heal, or you can use it to justify staying stuck. You can become the person you needed when you were in that dark place, or you can remain the person who needed saving. The choice is yours. But understand this: every day you wait to step fully into your power is another day someone else stays trapped, waiting for permission to believe they deserve better. Your healing is not just personal, it's political, it's spiritual, it's revolution. Because every person who breaks free from toxic patterns creates space for others to do the same. The time for playing small is over. The time for accepting crumbs is finished. The time for apologizing for your worth has ended. Your new life is waiting. Not tomorrow, not next week, not when you feel ready. Today, right now, this moment. Step into it with the confidence of someone who has been tested by fire and emerged not as ashes but as phoenix. You weren't meant to stay with the narcissist. You were meant to learn from them, heal from them, and become so magnificent that you inspire others to break free from anyone who doesn't recognize their light. This is your time. This is your moment. This is your life. Start living it like you mean.